Today we're going to be talking about what your glasses are made from. We're going to be exploring the different materials used in the production of frames, from the cheapest to the best, and from the most common to the most rare. So hi, I'm Robert, Style and Vision Consultant here at the Spectacle Factory, and it's my job to pair you with your perfect pair of glasses. And part of selecting the right frames, a big part of it is actually choosing the right material. Every material has its own properties, and of course, within each material category, there are different qualities and grades. So sit back and relax, this is going to really help you choose your next pair of glasses. And when I said we're starting with the cheapest, I really meant it. So if you choose frames which are typically below $100, this is what you're likely to get. Either an injection molded plastic frame or a metal frame made from an alloy. And besides the advantage of them being cheap, there are a lot of disadvantages. Frames like this can cause allergies, not in most people, but occasionally. And both of these glasses just feel like a toy. Frames in these materials and at that price point will be typically mass produced in China. And it's the same factories that produce lots of other plastic and metal parts for lots of other industries. So there's nothing special, welcoming, or even cool about them. They're just designed to do a job. And as a utility, I guess they do that, but only to a limited extent, because frames like this are going to fail after 1 or 2 years. Now the scary thing is that it's not just frames at this price point that are made from these kind of materials. Actually, a lot of the fashion brand glasses are produced in the same factories. But of course, they add that logo on the temple, and I'm not going to name names, but if you've followed this channel long enough, you know who I'm talking about right now. In those factories, frames are mass produced from those kind of materials, and they are basically cheap plastic or metal glasses, but with a logo on the side, and that gives them the ability to charge sometimes hundreds of dollars. That's not what this channel is about. This channel is about great quality glasses, and often better value glasses that are made by companies who only produce frames. But, you know, they do exist. Moving on to something more exciting, and if you are going for a simple metal frame, stainless steel is where to start. Because stainless steel is hypoallergenic, therefore you can't have an allergy to it, and generally speaking, it's just way more robust, more comfortable, lighter weight. In this case, this is a fused frame from the industrial workshop in Paris. They are making frames from this almost impossibly thin surgical steel. And this particular frame is made from both recycled and recyclable metal. Stainless steel frames tend to be less expensive compared against titanium, which we're going to cover next. But that doesn't necessarily make them worse. In fact, a frame like this is lighter than a lot of titanium glasses because of the way that it's manufactured. And it also keeps the price point lower, especially when you have embellishments on the frame like you see in this example. In terms of disadvantages, it's not as strong and it's not as lightweight as titanium. So in most cases, a titanium frame is better than a steel frame. So that brings us on to titanium, the lightest, strongest metal used in eyewear manufacturing. This is the flat iron from Masanaga, a very classic rectangular shape, which has a very officey, very business-like feel to it. This is really good if you're wearing something to the office every day, especially if you're wearing a suit. I think this looks extremely formal, but with a hint of style to it as well. And this frame is so well balanced and poised. Masanaga are the best manufacturer of frames probably in the world at the moment. Titanium, as I mentioned, is super light and super strong, so the world's best glasses tend to be made in titanium. But it has its disadvantages too, number one being the cost. And no, the material cost is not actually that different from steel, but the equipment and skill set needed to work with titanium is on a different level, and that's what usually makes the glasses more expensive. There's another disadvantage to titanium, which is that it's very difficult to coat. So paintwork on titanium frames does tend to chip or scratch, so you have to be a little careful with it from that perspective. Probably the most popular material used in frame manufacturing is acetate. Now, acetate is actually a plant-based material. It's made from cotton fibers. It's first manufactured in huge sheets where the coloration is applied. And with acetate, you can get these beautiful variations in color that you just can't achieve with basically anything else. And those sheets are then eventually made into blocks. And from the block, an acetate frame is cut. Now, when you hold an acetate frame compared against an injection molded frame, the difference is night and day. The material feels soft. It feels natural. It feels maybe not warm to the touch, but also not cold to the touch. It doesn't feel like a toy all of a sudden. It feels like a well-made and well-balanced item to hold in your hands, and especially to wear on your face. Now, acetate frames, especially when they're made as thick as this, can be heavy. But because the weight is distributed, especially on your nose, rather than having nose pads, acetate frames can be more comfortable for a lot of people. And acetate is where you see the biggest variety in quality, because you can have acetate frames at around $100 and you can have acetate frames $1,000 or more. Now that generally comes down to three things. Number one is where the acetate itself was manufactured. So you generally get acetate manufacturing in China, Italy, and Japan. The next thing is where the actual frame itself was manufactured, because you can take Italian acetate and have that made in Japan, or Chinese acetate and have it made in Italy. And then the third thing is just how much work goes into the acetate frame itself during the manufacturing process. This is a frame by Gast, which I've often described as the best value glasses in the world. And hopefully you can see why, because these frames are less than $200 and look exceptional. They look like really high-end glasses, and to be honest, they feel like it too. But because these frames are made from Chinese acetate in China, it keeps the cost really low, and that's what makes them great value. Now, you might think that Italian acetate frames are a big step up, but actually, when you look at the best factories in China, they're knocking on the door of Italy, and I would actually say that there's very little difference between the highest end Chinese acetate frames and Italian-made frames. This is an Italian acetate from a brand called Portrait, a very underrated and very artistic, very cool eyewear brand that I probably should talk about more. Now, Portrait frames are inspired by the art world, but you can really see that when they're worn because they have that aura about them, they have that sharpness and that style, which really only the Italians can do. I think they do style better than anybody. The Author, which is the model that I'm holding, has this matte finish that's applied to it that actually contrasts against glossy elements as well. So for example, it's glossy along the top rim, matte on the front of the frame, and that gives it a really interesting dichotomy. But in terms of actual quality, the acetate on these two frames feels more or less the same. Maybe the Italian acetate slightly edges it, and also the workmanship that's done on this frame is higher than Gast, which is a bit more simplistically finished. But both regions for acetate manufacturing pale in comparison to Japan. Because when you hold and feel and wear a Japanese acetate frame, it is most of the time next level. I'm not going to say that all Japanese eyewear brands are ahead of the game, but the best ones like LA Eyeworks are. Now, LA Eyeworks is actually a US-based company. These frames are designed in Los Angeles, but handmade in Japan. And I honestly think they are the best quality acetate frames that are available today. Now, there are no massive embellishments on these glasses. What is special about LA Eyeworks is the coloration. They do these just incredible, sumptuous colors, and the quality of the finishing, the detail, the polishing. A frame like this will go through dozens of steps of production, whereby the frame is perfected and perfected and perfected. Handmade from start to finish. First of all, it's cut to shape, but then it's sculpted and crafted just to get each corner, each line, each detail absolutely impeccable. And then polished and polished and polished again until you get a frame that's as glossy and iridescent as this. The coloration of this is just absolutely out of this world. And you do have to say it's a level above. So if I was to try and quantify it, let's say we had a scale of quality from 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, I would say that Chinese acetate frames tend to be between 1 and 6, depending on the quality of the brand itself. Italian acetate frames tend to be between 3 and 8, and then Japanese acetate frames tend to be between 7 and 10. So there is overlap between the three regions. You can get a Chinese-made acetate frame that's better than an Italian one, and you can get an Italian acetate frame that's actually better than a Japanese one. Stepping back a second and looking just at the material, you would think that a material is a material, so acetate is the same everywhere. But actually that's not the case. What happens with acetate, because it's a natural living material, it actually loses its moisture content over time. And when you see acetate frames that have dried out, they have these white marks to them, they lose their finish, and they start to become brittle, and then they start to crack or snap. What happens with the better quality acetate sheets is that they're actually left to age naturally, just like an expensive whiskey. They're aged in advance so that they lose their moisture content before they're actually manufactured into frames. And that's the fundamental reason why certain acetate frames are better than others, purely based on the material. Phew, that was a long one, an important one, but we've got a long way to go. And now we're going to look at some of the more exotic materials used in the manufacturing of your glasses. Next up, I want to cover carbon fiber. Now, I actually made a video a few years ago saying that the JFRay 2836 is my favorite pair of glasses. The front of these glasses is completely made from carbon fiber, which gives it this matte, bold, textured look, which I think looks awesome. It's very futuristic, definitely not over the top or flashy, aside from the burnt orange temples, which obviously give them that little edge. But carbon fiber is a great material because it is so durable and so lightweight. So despite the fact that these frames look quite bold, they're actually very comfortable. And carbon fiber gives you that slightly sporty, slightly high-tech look. And speaking of different, another example from JFRA, the 3101, and it's actually made from 3D printed polyamide. Polyamide, just like acetate, has different grades. Polyamide is a powder-based substance which is laser printed into a frame. So this frame literally starts off as a pile of dust and is made into what you see here. But that polyamide powder can contain other ingredients like carbon fiber to make it more reinforced, for example. And I'm not exactly sure what's used in these frames specifically, but I do know that they're super cool and take that futuristic look that I just described up a notch. But at the same time, this is probably the lightest frame on the table. Yes, even lighter than titanium. Polyamide is just like almost weightless, despite the fact that these frames are quite thick. But the best feature of polyamide is the fact that you can get all of this detail in the frame without having to finish it and hand make it. It's made from the ground up in this exact design. It opens up a lot more avenues of creativity to the designer who's creating them. The disadvantage to materials like this is in the hand they do feel kind of cheap. They feel too lightweight. They feel, well, they don't have that softness that acetate does. And it's very difficult to finish a frame like this to look really premium. Now, JFRA did a great job. They're awesome glasses, but they don't have that expensive luxury aesthetic to them like a truly handmade acetate frame does. But if you want something even more luxurious than acetate, how about leather? Yes, in 2025, you can have frames made from leather, made completely from leather. This frame is leather inside and out. From Luca de Stale in Paris, who handmakes every single pair of glasses to order. Leather is something else. First of all, you get this amazing coloration that you just wouldn't find on literally any other frame because it's a natural material. Number two, and most importantly, it has this beautiful cushioned, soft feel to it. I would say that leather frames, of all the materials that exist, feel the best to wear. They're not weightless like titanium. They have this kind of reassuring presence to them. And just like leather shoes or leather gloves feel great, so does a leather frame. Now, you might not have ever considered a leather pair of glasses, but I'm here to tell you that you really should, especially if you want something like best of the best. These beat acetate frames for me all day long. Now, with Luca de Stale, you can customize every aspect of the glasses, from the outer color to the inner color, and there are actually different types of leather, for example, goat leather, iguana leather, the list goes on. And I guess the only downside to a material like this is that it will pick up patina over time, so it's going to get scuffs and scrapes, just like a leather jacket would look distressed after a while, or leather shoes are not going to look new 3 years down the line. But I actually think that's part of the beauty of a natural material, is that it does age with you, and it's going to look different pretty much every time you wear it based on the age and wear of the material itself. And speaking of natural materials, buffalo horn is actually one of the oldest, if not the oldest, frame material. I believe the world's first ever glasses were made from buffalo horn, or it might be bone, but definitely a material like that. And the awesome thing with buffalo horn is that the patination of each piece is one of a kind. It takes it up a level even from leather. Now, buffalo horn is also super lightweight, and no animals are harmed in the harvesting of buffalo horn because buffaloes naturally shed their horns, so they're simply collected from the ground. These particular frames are made by Limburg, a Danish company who is probably the best maker of buffalo horn frames. There are a few out there. The disadvantage to buffalo horn, very expensive, and it's quite brittle, so you have to care for it with a special care cream which needs to be applied every few months, and they're not adjustable. So that's why a frame like this is great, which has titanium temples which can be adjusted. If you get a full pure buffalo horn frame, it's a bit of a risky venture because unless they're exactly the right fit, they're almost never going to be the right fit. Now, with the right technique, you can adjust them a little bit, not to the extent that you can with, say, an acetate frame, and that's why buffalo horn frames continue to be very rare. The final natural material we're going to cover is wood, and Cartier are known for their wood rimless frames, one of the most iconic frame looks in the world. Maybe the most legendary rimless frame that exists, I would say so. This is also a new coloration of wood, a lot lighter and a lot glossier than they've done before, so it has this extremely smooth finish to it. Means that they really glide on and off effortlessly. And wood, of course, is also a very lightweight material, but also very brittle. So wood glasses are not for you if you cannot be careful with your glasses. If you try to bend this, it's going to snap. It's a piece of wood. Although Cartier do use laminate layers of wood to improve the durability. No two pieces of wood are the same. And if you want really special glasses, especially rimless glasses, I recommend wood as an awesome frame material. Last up, before I reveal the most valuable frame material, we're going to look at aluminium. This is the Porsche design 8951, a limited edition one-piece aluminium frame. So the whole front of these glasses is carved from a single block of aluminium, and pretty thick aluminium as well. Now the beauty of aluminium is that despite this frame being very thick, it's super lightweight. So these feel like titanium frames. In fact, aluminium is lighter than titanium, but not quite as durable. It's a softer material. It does give this awesome finish that you cannot replicate in titanium. I think the finish of aluminium, I personally prefer it, this kind of brushed look, this sculpted look. You could not do a titanium frame that looks as sharp as this, or as cool, futuristic. It's amazing. It looks just super special, and it's obviously not everybody's look, but they're extremely rare. I would say aluminium, after the last one that I'm about to show you, is the rarest frame material, and that's because it's so difficult to work with. So to craft an aluminium frame, you have to screw parts together because it doesn't weld very well. You have to incorporate springs into the hinges, and they have to be very durable because the frame needs to flex, because this material is very rigid and won't flex at all. And that's why frame manufacturers have generally steered away from aluminium, but if you can get one, it is honestly one of my favorite frame materials. Now, the number one rarest and most expensive frame material is solid gold. Remember I mentioned Lindbergh earlier? Well, this is their most special frame material, solid white gold. Now, you can get solid gold, of course, in yellow gold, rose gold. There's even black gold, believe it or not. I didn't believe it. But if you have a frame made in solid gold, it's something that no one is really going to know. You're wearing something so expensive, so luxurious, and so special, but you're going to know, and it feels amazing. It feels like a privilege just to have them on. So having glasses that every time you open them up out of the box, every time you put them on your face, feeling special every time you wear something, is not something you can put a price on, although actually you can. It's like several $1,000s. Solid gold frames are not just priced on the actual gold content, but also on the craftsmanship that's involved in making them, because making a pair of glasses from solid gold is a skill that is extremely rare. You have only master goldsmiths who are able to do it, not just your regular frame manufacturers. No matter how experienced they are, working with solid gold is just a different skill set entirely. This particular solid gold frame is also inset with diamonds, and you can go wild and add precious stones to a solid gold frame as well. You know, not that anyone's ever going to know you've got a solid gold frame, but just to feel super special when you wear it and to have something that basically nobody else has, then solid gold is the way to go. So that just about covers every single frame material, and I hope you found it interesting. Which of these materials have you tried before, and which ones would you like to try? Let me know in the comments below.